His job title could easily read Europe's head of security. As Secretary General of the world's largest regional security organization, Thomas Greminger's responsibilities are vast and varied, monitoring everything from human rights, elections, gender equality and the economy, all while finding a way to keep the 57 member states talking. But that's proving particularly difficult when it comes to Russia and Ukraine, as the war along their border seems a long way from being resolved. Another point of contention is the appointment of the Albanian Prime Minister, Edi Rama, as the body's new chairman, which has raised more than a few eyebrows. So to speak about these challenges and more, we have the Secretary General of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, Thomas Greminger, who joins us now from Vienna. Great to have you on the show. So your term ends in 6 months' time, in July. Tell us what's on your achievements list, success list, but also on your to-do list.
Clearly, managing conflicts in the OSCE area is top of the OSCE agenda. And here, as a Secretary General, my main responsibility is to support the negotiation formats that the OSCE has, be it regarding Ukraine, be it regarding the Transnistrian settlement process, or the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, or the conflict dealt with by the Geneva International Discussions, that is regarding Georgia. I think we've been fairly successful in managing these conflicts, in containing them, in alleviating human suffering. This is particularly true also for Ukraine. We haven't been particularly successful in moving them towards resolution. But here I would also argue that this is very much then a matter, a function of the political will of the parties to a conflict, while an international organization like the OSCE is tasked to be as responsive as possible to a changing political environment.
And with regards to Ukraine, in particular, of course, East Ukraine, you say you haven't been particularly successful, but you know, I ask, this is the worst ongoing conflict in Europe, more than 10,000 people dead, almost daily shelling. Has your organization actually done anything to improve the situation there?
I would argue that we've been successful in containing the conflict over the last 5 years. We've been successful in alleviating human suffering to quite an extent. I would refer to the ceasefires, these local windows of silence that we've been constantly organizing, more than 1,000 last year, which has a very decisive impact on the quality of life of 4 million people on both sides of the line of contact, because this allows to repair transmission lines, water supply systems, etc. So in that sense, we've been successful. Now, when it comes to resolving the conflict politically, I would point to a new political dynamic that we've been observing since last summer. There is a new political impulse coming from the Normandy 4 group, that is France, Germany, the Russian Federation and Ukraine. And since last summer, I think we have clearly notable progress when it comes to successful disengagement in the 3 pilot disengagement areas. We have seen an exchange of detainees in September and now again on the 29th of December. So we have seen a number of confidence building measures implemented. I think we have seen a successful Paris summit in December that calls for additional disengagement areas, that calls for more demining, that calls for additional measures to strengthen the ceasefire. There is work ongoing for yet another exchange of detainees. So I think there is, since last summer, clearly a new, much more conducive dynamic towards implementing the Minsk agreements.
Okay, but there still are ceasefire violations from your daily reports nearly every single day. So progress, but still violations daily, you'd say?
That's correct. The ceasefire violations are still way too high. They did come down since last summer. Over the last few weeks, they've been relatively low with occasional spikes, but it's true we still have not achieved a sustainable ceasefire, and this is clearly a challenge. We've been, again, relatively successful in bringing down civilian casualties. That they've come down massively over the last 3 years. So that's positive. But of course, there is still a long way to go, absolutely.
I want to ask you about your nationality. Being Swiss, has this helped in being perceived as being neutral in negotiations?
Well, given current tensions, given and again widening East-West gap, it's clearly no disadvantage to come from a country that is not perceived to have a regional agenda, that is perceived to be neutral, impartial, and that is also perceived to offer conflict management expertise.
Okay, so how would you say that helps the next chairman of the OSCE, who is Albania, and its Prime Minister Edi Rama, who takes over the chairmanship? And this has been quite controversial. Even some media reports have even called it not only ironic, but a pure hypocrisy, considering the allegations against him of corruption and eroding democracy and free speech. So what would your message be to critics?
I would argue that it is quite an achievement for a country like Albania to chair a regional organization of the size of the OSCE. If you see where Albania comes from, then you can only be impressed about what has been achieved in a relatively short time. Clearly, chairing the OSCE is a huge challenge, also for countries, that are much bigger than Albania. I would see clearly an opportunity for a win-win outcome, both for the organization and for Albania. Albania, as you allude to, is clearly challenged by a number of security challenges that the OSCE deals with. Preventing violent extremism, countering terrorism, fighting corruption, establishing democratic institutions, strengthening the rule of law, etc. In that sense, I think Albania can at the same time bring in its own experiences in tackling, in dealing
But what about
with these
Edi Rama
issues.
himself?
The Prime Minister launched the Albanian chairmanship last week here in Vienna. And I can tell you this was a very powerful, a very impressive launch. The Prime Minister is very committed also to invest political capital in chairing the OSCE. And while you need, of course, a strong diplomatic team here in Vienna that runs, I would say, 70 to 80% of the challenges of chairing the OSCE, I think it is important to have a prime minister that is ready to come in when political support is needed, when you need to pick up the phone and call colleagues of yours in capitals to make the final push to get a consensus decision achieved.
And I want to ask you, do you think your organization, the OSCE, is still relevant in this day and age?
I think we are extremely relevant, but perhaps we are coming back to what we did mainly in the first years of our existence, when we started out as the conference on security and cooperation in Europe, when we tried to manage tensions between the East and West. And given the current challenges, the current tensions again between East and West, you need a platform for inclusive dialogue. And I would argue that the OSCE is, if not at least one, if not the last, remaining platform where you can discuss security challenges with everybody in the OSCE area sitting at the same table, be it political military issues that are again relevant in Europe, or be it counterterrorism, be it combating cyber threats, trafficking of all sorts. I think indeed we are more relevant than ever.
Okay, and on that point, because you did touch on it, what do you think is the most concerning for peace for Europe right now? Is it cyber attacks? Is it the coming back of former Daesh militants to Europe? Is it Russia? What would you say it is?
I think, what makes it so challenging is that it is a complex set of issues. We have started our conversation by talking about Ukraine. When you look at the low of trust between key stakeholders of European security, clearly Ukraine is a key contributor. We still have protracted conflicts in Europe. But against the backdrop of these conflicts, we are facing transnational threats, and you have alluded to some of them, terrorism, violent extremism, but also more and more cyber-related issues, cyber threats stemming from state actors, but also cyber crime. We are confronted with trafficking. And then what we see is a new emerging set of security issues that are related to climate change. What are the repercussions of climate change on security in the OSCE area? And then, of course, rapid technological change. Just imagine the impact of artificial intelligence on all aspects of our comprehensive approach to security. So it's also these challenges that we will have to deal with in the years to come.
All right, Thomas Greminger, we thank you so much for joining us on the Newsmakers, and we wish you the best of luck with the rest of your term.